On December 17th, 1994, Carlos Buxton was being chased through Bold Street, Liverpool, England. As he ran along the street, he soon noticed that his surroundings had changed around him. The gray buildings remained in the same places, but the shop fronts looked different, and the people he saw were dressed in clothing from a different era. He was discovered 5 days later by the Watsons, the occupiers of the building, bricked inside a room that had been unused for decades. The Watsons claim they heard strange sounds coming through the air vent, which they traced to a walled-up room at the back of their house. While investigating, they found Carlos trapped there. Carlos was rushed to the hospital, where in a disoriented condition, he spoke of entering a time slip and being followed by a sinister, tall man. This is the only account he told, which he gave to his reporter uncle, Xander Buxton, a few days later, which details the horrific horrors he went through on that fateful day when, for him, time slipped. I hadn't been living in Liverpool long. I moved here with my family less than a year ago, and although I'd found a job and made some friends, my southern accent and awkward ways made me feel like I stood out. And not in a good way. Most of the people I hung out with were great, except for this one guy, Mickey. He was arrogant and unpredictable and treated his girlfriend, Stacy, like dirt, and I hated how he made her feel. But as the new guy in the group, well, it was easier to stay quiet. But then one cold December morning, I opened my front door to find Stacy sitting on my doorstep, soaked through, shivering, and with a black eye. I took her inside. I let her use the shower, and I gave her some of my clothes to wear. I didn't get a chance to ask her what happened, but it didn't take a genius to figure out the swine who'd done this to her. The door shook open, and in stormed Mickey, a face twisted with pure hatred. His eyes flicked from Stacy's soaked coat hanging over the chair to the bedroom where she walked out in my clothes, towel drying her hair. Stacy tried telling him it wasn't what it looked like, but he put 1 and 1 together and made 5. It was no good trying to reason with a guy like Mickey. I knew if I stayed there, I would be a dead man, but I saw an opportunity to charge past him and then run out of there. I kept on running, and running, and running. The adrenaline surged through my body and willed me on. I heard him shouting behind me, "You're dead, Carlos. You're dead." I ran toward the town center, thinking it would be better to go somewhere busy. With Christmas just over a week away, the streets were bustling with people. I weaved around them the best I could, muttering sorry as I bumped into people. I peered behind me and saw Mickey there, gaining on me, so I rushed past Lime Street Station and kept on going. My friend owns a record store close to there, so my plan was to cut through Bold Street and sneak into my friend's shop before Mickey could get to me. It was as I ran along Bold Street, something changed. The shops around me became less vibrant, neon, and color, and they had old-fashioned looking signs. It didn't make any sense. I peered behind me, but I couldn't see Mickey anymore. Instead, I saw people in velvet-collared jackets and trilby hats bustling along with their shopping. And then, a box van whizzed around the corner, almost knocking me right off my feet. It looked like the sort of thing they drove in 50s movies, and blazoned on the side of it was this name, Kaplan's. I stared around me in confusion, the blare from the box van's horn echoing in my head. And then the street sign was there, Bold Street, as clear as day, but the buildings and people looked out of place, as if they'd been transported from a different decade. I was so confused, but not knowing what else to do. I wandered along the street, trying my best to make sense of it all, while I caught my breath. I was peering in a shop window, crypts, looking at the court shoes and box-shaped handbags display. I pressed my hand to the window, not understanding it. The last time I'd been here, just last week, this shop was a bookstore. Now it felt like I stepped back in time. As I stared at the store, unable to quite believe what was going on, I saw his reflection in the mirror. There was a tall man, almost 7 feet, standing there on the other side of the pavement. Despite his stature, people walked past him. Without as much as a second glance, he was wearing a brown tweed suit and staring directly at me. I spun around and I saw him there, his glare intense and unfaltering. He was cupping something in his hand. I couldn't quite make out what it was, but some sort of red substance was dripping down his fingers. Even from that distance, I could feel the dark energy emitting from him. There was nothing pure about this man. I turned and I walked on along the street, desperate to make some distance between me and that tall man. When I next peered back, the tall man had gone. I felt relieved about this, but I still had that uneasy feeling in my gut. I also had no idea what was going on. I saw a woman in a fur coat buying a newspaper from a newsstand. I went over to her and I asked her what the date and year were, and she looked at me like I was crazy, but held up the paper and pointed at the date. My stomach lurched in disbelief. December 17th, 1953. I let out a nervous laugh. She tutted and hurried away from me. How could I slip backward 4 decades? This shouldn't be possible. I felt like someone was messing with me, like I'd ended up a victim to a Uri Geller mind trick. I pinched my arm, convinced it had been some messed up dream. I felt that pinch as much as I felt the cold. I had a sweater on but no jacket. I'd left in a hurry, thinking about it. It was lucky I even had my sneakers on. I laughed at this fact, and I got another strange look from a mother with her daughter. I heard her ask her mother why my clothes looked so funny. The mother shushed her and steered her away. When I turned my head, I gasped when I saw who was in front of me. It was that tall man. It was as if he'd appeared out of nowhere. He held his hand out toward me. I saw the blood running down his pale hand, but his fingers were still curled around the item and I couldn't make out what it was. He didn't say a word. He just looked directly at me. A soulless, blank stare. The darkness seemed to surround him, and being this close to him made it worse. That much coldness shouldn't ooze from a person. I felt the dread rising inside of me, and I knew I had to get as far away from him as I could. As I ran away, I looked back to see the tall man standing in the exact same spot, his bloodied hand still outstretched. I didn't know how to end all of this and go back to my time. All I knew was that at that moment, I wanted to get away from that tall man. I ended up running up a side street and reached a dead end filled with dumpsters. I desperately tried to scan for somewhere to go when I saw a peeling red door wedged open with a boot. I looked at it, thinking it must lead to the back of a shop or someone's home. I didn't want to trespass, as given my out-of-place appearance, I thought if I got caught, I wouldn't be able to explain what I was doing there. As I slowly moved back up the side street, he appeared, the tall man. He stood there, blocking my exit, his hand outstretched. I still couldn't tell what he was holding on to, but I saw his fingers pulsing around it, as if the object itself was beating. I pressed my hand to my beating heart and then turned and stepped through the red door, deciding to take my chances in there over a run-in with him. Before I disappeared out of sight, I looked back at the tall man and saw that he was just standing there, unflinching. This time, there was the slightest of smirks on his otherwise expressionless face. I stepped inside of what appeared to be a small back room. It was dark and dingy, and the store walls seemed to glisten with dampness. I saw another door into the main part of the building, but as I reached out to turn the handle, something happened. Something I can't explain. The light vanished, drowning me in darkness. It was stifling, and I struggled to breathe. I frantically felt around the room, feeling 4 stone walls with little width between them, but no sign of a door. I screamed out for help, but my cries were muffled. I thudded on the wall, to no avail, and then I slumped to the ground defeated. There was no way out. I thought I was going to die there, trapped, where no one would ever find me. Time passed. I don't know if it was hours or days. It all seemed irrelevant. I felt something dripping down on my head, a constant drip, 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 drip. I was in a nightmare, a monotonous, dark, dripping nightmare. And then I kicked something over. I fumbled to pick it up and found what felt like a plastic bottle. As I turned it, the liquid within it gushed. I unscrewed the lid and I sniffed at it. It was smellless. My lips were chapped and my mouth ached from thirst. It could have been anything, but with nothing left to lose, I tried a small sip. It was water. For the briefest of moments, my eyes widened with delight, but then reality hit me. The water would only prolong the agony of dying in a place like this. Every so often, I would find a bout of energy from within myself. I'd use it to scream, to thud, to scratch on the walls. My hands were bruised and bloody, and my fingernails scraped off. In the end, I couldn't even think about my family or friends anymore. All I could picture was the tall man. He was vivid in my mind, only this time in his outstretched hand I could see clearly what he was holding. A beating, pulsating heart. I immediately placed my hand on my chest to feel something, anything. But I heard no beating. All I could hear was the sounds of my own panicked thoughts. And then I heard something. Voices coming from above me. I thought that I was imagining them, that I'd lost my mind completely. I shouted one last time. Before I knew that was it, I had no shout left to give. I was out of water and out of time. I had no choice but to let the darkness claim me. I remembered the crashing sound and dust and rubble fall around me. I heard an Oasis song coming from somewhere, and then I remember the burst of light, so strong it burned my eyes, and then I saw a man in safety goggles and a painted t-shirt, a hammer in his hand, and a bewildered look on his face. I don't remember much more after that. I woke up in a hospital with my family around me. I was so skittish. I honestly thought I would slip away into the past again, that the tall man would be there, taunting me. Now, days later, I still feel uncomfortable, but it's over.